So we'll be talking about Plasmodium vivax, the life history of Plasmodium, life history. So before I begin with the life history, I will talk about the two hosts which are there in the life history. So the first one is the man and another one is the mosquito. In man, malaria is caused, whereas the mosquito is harmless. Mosquito contains, or we can say that it carries the sexual phase, and it is also known as the final, or we also call it as the primary host or the definitive host. So these are the other names to the host, right? So another we talk about man where asexual phase is taking place. Asexual means we'll be talking about how binary fission is going to take place here. It is the asexual phase, right? Asexual phase, and we call it as the secondary or the intermediate host. If we have to differentiate between, before I begin with the life history, let me just differentiate you with the male and female anopheles. So I think, as you all know, it is only the female anopheles which carries this parasite. So how do we differentiate between the male and the female? Male is, if you talk about their antennae, they are very bushy. Whereas in case of females, they are not that bushy. So comparatively lesser bushy. So I think by visualizing the antenna, you can, so on the basis of its antennae, you can differentiate between male and female anopheles, right? So this is just the basic information about Plasmodium vivax life history. Now I discuss in detail the life history, how exactly the asexual and the sexual phases are going to run in this particular life history. So life history is further divided into three portions: schizogony, gamogony, and the third one is sporogony. Schizogony is the phase of growth. It is the phase of growth. And another thing, the asexual multiplication is taking place in case of schizogony. So this is first phase of growth, another asexual reproduction, and the third one is that it occurs only in man, right? So this is regarding the schizogony. Then next we have gamogony, where this is considered as the sexual phase. Sexual multiplication takes place. Here it starts in man and it is going to be completed in the mosquito. So this is about the gamogony. Gamo means gametes. So basically in this particular stage, we will see the gametes are going to be formed. And lastly is the sporogony. Sporogony, it is the phase of sexual reproduction again. Sexual multiplication, which takes place only in mosquito. Right. So this is just a brief information about the three phases. So first I'm going to discuss about schizogony. Right. So this schizogony is in two phases. Very important. The first phase is exoerythrocytic, or we also call it as the hepatic schizogony. Exoerythrocytic or hepatic schizogony. And the another one is erythrocytic schizogony. Okay, if we talk about where this exoerythrocytic schizogony takes place, so it takes place in the liver cells. Hepatic means hepatic cells, so it is in the liver. This takes place in the liver. Erythrocytes, from the name itself, erythrocyte, it takes place in the RBCs. So it is in the RBC, right? So these are the two phases under schizogony. So I'm discussing about the first phase of schizogony, that is of exoerythrocytic schizogony. So I'm discussing first the first part, that is the exoerythrocytic, or we also call it as the hepatic one, which is found in the liver. So this is again further divided into two types. First one is the pre-erythrocytic schizogony and post-erythrocytic schizogony, right? So first I'm going to discuss about the pre-erythrocytic. So basically this is the broad category. The habitat remains same, that is the liver cell, right? So under the pre-erythrocytic schizogony, it starts with the first portion, the exoerythrocytic schizogony. It starts with the inoculation. So what do you understand by the term inoculation? Or it is infection to man. So how basically this infection to man takes place? How the parasites, they enter into the human blood. Parasites enter the human blood when an infected, so this is important here, when an infected, a female Anopheles has to be infected when they are putting or inserting their parasite into the host. So female Anopheles has to be, if the female Anopheles is not infected, she is not the source of infection, right? So and female infected Anopheles is very important. And why these female Anopheles suck the blood? Normally male, they suck the plant sap. Male Anopheles, they suck the plant sap. Why only females suck the blood? So the reason behind it, the females require, you can say they suck the blood for their egg production. So this is a very important reason behind it, why only female Anopheles are sucking the blood, because this is basically, blood is the meal for whether it is infected, whether it is not infected, the blood of human, but they require it for the production of eggs. Okay? So it acts as a meal, we can say it that way also. Okay, now how the female Anopheles is infecting the or inoculating into the man. So as we all know that Anopheles has a piercing and sucking type of mouth parts. Okay, so piercing and sucking. So as the name is specifying, piercing. So first it is going to pierce into the skin and simultaneously it is going to suck the blood. So it is just like the needle. It is going to, with the help of its proboscis, it is going to inject those needle-like proboscis into the skin of the human being and take the droplet of blood, and at the same time it is also going to inject a saliva, right? So if that female Anopheles is infected, so that parasites are going to enter into the blood of human at the same time. If it is not infected, automatically the life history is not going to continue, right? So here we can say that the saliva carries the parasites to human blood. But the condition for that has to be there, that the Anopheles is infected, right? Now, the infective stage, the infective parasite is known as, or we can say this infective stage also. So this infective parasite is the sporozoite. So this is the starting point where our pre-erythrocytic schizogony is going to start, right? So before beginning with the cycle, how exactly the sporozoite looks like? So basically it is sickle shape. So it is like this, somewhat like this. It has a slender body, as you can see, slightly curved. Okay? because if you see its edges, they are not straight, they are curved. It has a sickle shaped body. Okay, so one thing is your sickle shaped body. Another one, if we talk about how long is it, obviously I have made it a longer one, but otherwise how long it is 50 micrometers long, and it is enclosed by a pellicle. It is thin pellicle, or we can say a cuticle, and it is because of this cuticle it can maintain its shape. There in the broader part of the sporozoite is the nucleus, right? So the middle part is the nucleus. Other to it, the sporozoite has a very important feature of gliding, right? So it is because of this nature that it can glide in the blood, and at the same time, after half an hour, it can penetrate into the liver cell. So it has this gliding movement. Okay? Had it been, it did not have this gliding movement, it would have stayed at one particular position only. Okay? So gliding movement. Okay. Now, this is the first stage where the infective stage of parasite, or you can say it is going to infect the human being. Next point I'll discuss, that is the how multiplication of parasites are going to take place. So how does it take place? The sporozoites, when the infected Anopheles has bitten the human being, so the sporozoites have entered into the body of the human blood, right? Now, it is going to, the first very important, immediately after sucking, or you can say injecting the parasite, the sporozoites into the human being, it is not immediately going to go to the liver cell. It is going to stay in the blood for around half an hour. For half an hour, it is going to stay in the blood, right? And then after half an hour, and again very important thing here, when it is staying for half an hour in the blood of the human, right, it is not the source of infection, right? Even if some other mosquito comes and sucks up the blood, so it is not going to be the source of infection to some other human being, right? So it is only in the blood for half an hour, and then after half an hour, it is going to enter into the liver cell. Right. So how the liver cells look like? So the liver cells, we all know that they are hexagonal in its shape, right? Hepatocytes, they are made of hepatocytes. So now each sporozoite, because they are going to be n number of sporozoites. So these sporozoites are entering into the liver cell. So here each sporozoite are going to enter into different type of, or you can say different liver cells, but here I am just talking in respect to one liver cell, how it is affecting one liver cell, right? So this sporozoite, now you can see here with the nucleus, with the sickle shape, now it is penetrating into the liver cell. So within the liver cell, there is a nucleus. Sporozoite is entering. This is the first step now. Okay. This next step is, you can see when the sporozoite is entering into the liver cell, it is still sickle shaped. But the second stage, the nucleus remains there. Immediately it enters into the liver cell, it becomes rounded in structure. Okay, so this sporozoite has become rounded in structure immediately as it enters into the body, the liver cell. So we call this stage as, when the sporozoite finally enters into the liver cell, we call it as the cryptozoite, right? So it is cryptozoite, right? Then this cryptozoite, basically, if we talk about its ultrastructure, so it has a compact nucleus. It lacks vacuole. Okay, so it lacks cryptozoite. It lacks vacuole and pigment, which is basically the characteristic feature of a trophozoite cell. So, right? So this is basically, it has a nucleus, but it lacks vacuole and pigment. This is the second stage. In the third stage, what happened? The nucleus moves towards one side, right? And the cryptozoid, because within the cryptozoid there are cytoplasm also. So within this cryptozoid, this feeds on the cytoplasm and it becomes a rounder structured body. So again, this rounded cryptozoid, again it has a nucleus in between. Okay, but now you can see the size has increased and the nucleus has been displaced to bit side, and now this particular site we call it as the pre-erythrocytic schizont, or we also call it as cryptoschizont. So that is up to you what you want to remember, pre-erythrocytic schizont or cryptoschizont. So how cryptoschizont is found? It is formed when the cryptozoids feeds on the cytoplasm and it goes into this rounded structure. So this is the third structure, right? Now after this stage, what happens? It undergoes this cryptoschizont, it undergoes multiple fission. So this is the cryptoschizont, the third portion. You can see here it is the schizont, right? And it has a nucleus in the center. Next step, what happens? This step is going to undergo multiple fission. So what is going to undergo multiple fission? Cryptoschizont is going to undergo multiple fission. So here we can have another diagram which is going to be a bit bigger one and a nucleus, right? And now we can mention it as that multiple fission is taking place. Multiple fission is taking place, right? So after this, in this process, what exactly is going to take place? The nucleus, this particular nucleus which we have discussed in the cryptoschizont, that is going to break into, so nucleus is going to divide into many nuclei. So it is going to, during multiple fission, it is going to divide into numerous nuclei. So each nuclei here, which is very interesting, each nuclei is going to gather, it is going to, with each nucleus, there's going to be a cytoplasm. So basically, it is going to feed on this nucleus is going to feed one liver cell. So the number can be around 1000 parasites. So 1000 parasites in one liver cell. So we can imagine the amount of damage that is going to be in the entire liver. Next step after it, after the cryptomerozoite has been formed, the schizont, right? We call it as the schizont. The schizont and the liver cell is going to break up, right? So here we can have the structure where the schizont has broken out, right? And the liver cell, the wall of the liver is also up. So here, now what is going to get liberated out? Cryptomerozoites are going to be liberated out. The nucleus is still there. So these cryptomerozoites, they enter into the liver sinusoids. Before entering into the liver, they enter into the liver sinusoids. And what are these sinusoids basically? These sinusoids are small blood channels which have an incomplete wall. So small blood channels with incomplete, another thing that is with an incomplete wall. Once they have entered into the liver sinusoids, after that the cryptomerozoite is going to enter into the fresh liver cell. So now it has entered the cryptomerozoites. The cryptomerozoite have entered into the fresh liver cell. Fresh liver cell. Cryptomerozoite which has entered into the fresh liver cell to restart the exoerythrocytic schizogony, or we can say to restart the pre-erythrocytic schizogony. So again we start with it. Cryptomerozoite is entering into the fresh liver cell. So what is entering? Cryptomerozoite is entering into the fresh liver cell. The process again remains the same that we had just discussed previously. Once this cryptomerozoite has entered into the liver cell, it again becomes a rounded structure as we just discussed in the previous phase, that is when cryptozoites were formed. So when this cryptomerozoite enters into the fresh liver cell, it changes into the another form that is known as, the word meta comes here, that is metacryptozoite. Previously it was cryptozoite, right? So only the word new, that is metacryptozoite. So this term basically was given by Huff, Huff. Now this metacryptozoite, same as previously we had discussed, it is going to, this is the nucleus, and now this metacryptozoite is going to feed on the cytoplasm, and it is going to become rounded in structure. It is going to grow in size, and it is going to form the metacryptoschizont. Like in the previous one, we discussed it as the cryptoschizont. So here in the next, or you can say the second fresh liver cell when it is entering, we mention this as meta, right? So this metacryptoschizont is going to undergo the next phase, that is with the multiple fission. So here is the nucleus in the schizont. So it's the same way. This is the nucleus of liver cell. The schizont nucleus is again going to divide. Okay, it's going to undergo multiple fission, where it is going to form around 64 to 1000 metacryptomerozoites. So this is basically the another form which we call as the metacryptomerozoites. So how they are formed? They are formed when the nuclei of the schizont, nucleus, it divides to form many nuclei, and those nuclei are feeding on the cytoplasm. It forms metacryptomerozoites. So how many are they in number? If previously you remember, we discussed about the cryptomerozoites. They were around 1000 parasites. So here they vary from 64 to 1000 parasites. Now this metacryptomerozoites are of two types, right? So what are those two types? Macro, right? Only the word macro and micro is going to come in front. Rest is same. So it's not a very difficult term to memorize. Metacryptomerozoites. And another one is micro-metacryptomerozoites. So as the term is macro and micro, right? So macro means something bigger in size. So here they are larger but few in number, right? Whereas micro, they are smaller in size, but the number is numerous. So both these metacryptomerozoites, right? Both macro and meta, they are going to be again released into the liver sinusoids, as previously also we had discussed, right? And from liver sinusoids, either they are going to enter into the liver or into the RBCs, right? So basically, the habitat of micro-metacryptomerozoite is RBCs, right? Whereas macro-metacryptomerozoite, the habitat is liver. So after this stage, once the metacryptomerozoites have been formed and they are of two types, we come to the next phase where the schizont is going to be released out. Okay, so we've already discussed it's been released out. Released out how? The liver cell is going to break. So here you can see how the liver cell is going to be broken. So this is how the liver cell is broken, and micro and meta are going to be released. So both within this metacryptomerozoites, both macro and micro both are formed. So from here they are going to go into the liver sinusoids, and liver sinusoids, after liver sinusoids, either they will be going to the liver or they will be directly going into the RBCs. Okay. So next we talk about the cycle that we have discussed, right, starting from the sporozoite when it has entered into the fresh liver cell. up to this particular stage when the metacryptomerozoites are formed, it takes around 12 days. We call it as the pre-erythrocytic schizogony. So I had discussed it with you previously also that it is divided into two parts, pre-erythrocytic phase, right? So it is the pre-erythrocytic phase of schizogony where it starts from entering of the parasporozoid up to the metacryptomerozoites till they are not released out, right? So this is taking around how many days? 12 days. And the smaller ones, that is the micrometacryptomerozoites, they are directly entering into the RBCs. We'll be talking about the RBCs when these micrometacryptomerozoites entering into the RBCs in the another phase. But for now, I am going to discuss about the post-erythrocytic. So I have discussed about the pre-erythrocytic. Now we'll talk about the post-erythrocytic phase of schizogony. So what is going to happen here after these metacryptomerozoites are released and they enter into the liver sinusoids, and finally they are going to enter into the fresh liver cell. So this is what is going to happen. So this was the second phase, previous one was the first phase, and now this is the third phase where it is entering, where the parasite is entering into the fresh liver cell again. So here the metacryptomerozoid, what is entering here? The macrometacryptomerozoites. Macrometacryptomerozoid is entering into the macrometacryptomerozoid is entering into the fresh liver cell. Again, the same pattern follows. This becomes rounded in shape. So when it becomes rounded in shape, we call it as the just like the phase 2, cryptozoid, metacryptozoid. Again, the same thing follows. This is going to feed on the cytoplasm, increase in size, right? And it is going to become the metacryptoschizont. Metacryptoschizont, right? Again, the same thing. The nucleus of this schizont is going to multiply, it is going to undergo multiple fission, and it is going to have numerous nuclei, and those nuclei are going to feed on the cytoplasm. Another stage is going to form, that is the same, that stage is basically the metacryptomerozoites. So it is the metacryptomerozoites that are going to perform with the nucleus. So here, this particular case is the multiple fission. After multiple fission, what is going to form? Metacryptomerozoites are going to be formed. And then we come to the last pattern where it acts, or you can say it acts as this reservoir of parasites. So basically, they will now be bit bigger in size. So we call them as the reservoir. Reservoir of which type of a parasite? Reservoir of metacryptomerozoid type of a parasite. Right? So they are going to remain in the liver as long as the immunity of the person is good. If the level of immunity falls down due to any reason, it is going to break open, as we have discussed earlier also. So they are again going to be out, but this is only going to be, it is only going to break the liver cell, and the schizont is only going to break when the immunity falls. Otherwise, the person can stay with the same condition throughout its life also, right? So it is with the metacryptomerozoites which are being released, and again, the same process will go. Metacryptomerozoites are of two types, macro and micro. So again, that again depends whether they are going to enter into the liver sinusoids and then liver, or directly into the RBCs. So this phase, right starting when macrometacryptomerozoite has entered into the fresh liver cell, we call it as the erythrocytic phase of schizogony, and it basically in this particular condition the patient remains unaffected, right? It is only when the immunity falls, these reservoir of parasites are going to break open and finally they are going to attack the RBCs, right? So we call this, when this attack of or you could say this reservoir of parasites are going to break open, these RBCs, when they are going to attack the RBCs, it is going to come up with the relapse of malaria. So this particular post-erythrocytic schizogony is not, you can say, a part of the cycle. It is only, it goes as a storage, right? So when immunity falls, only then it comes into activation. Otherwise, it stays like this. We have discussed about the pre-erythrocytic and the post-erythrocytic phase of schizogony, or the first portion of schizogony, that is the exoerythrocytic phase of schizogony. Now we'll be discussing about the second portion, that is the erythrocytic schizogony. Erythrocytic schizogony, as the term says, erythrocytes, so it is going to take place in the RBC. It is in continuation with the pre-erythrocytic, when the metacryptomerozoites, they have entered into the micrometacryptomerozoites, they have entered into the RBCs, right? So now this is a RBC, right? And this micrometacryptomerozoite is entering into one corpuscle. So here also it happens the same way, one corpuscle, right? So that is how we have so many corpuscles, and accordingly they are going to attack similarly. Inside the corpuscle, once it has entered, this parasite becomes rounded. So again, same way, it is going to become rounded inside the corpuscle. The parasite becomes rounded and it is going to grow. How it is going to grow? It is going to grow by feeding on the cytoplasm of the corpuscle. So there is going to be cytoplasm. So this is growing this way. This phase is basically, we call this phase as the trophozoite phase when it is growing. So trophozoite, we have other name also. It is basically the feeding stage, we can say. Now this trophozoite, it develops in its body a large vacuole. So this large vacuole is like this. So when this third phase, third portion, if we say that it develops a large vacuole, because of which it is going to push the nucleus to one side. So it is going to be like this. And this form is going to give the shape of a ring. So we call it as the signet ring stage. So you know, the trophozoite has a nucleus and it has a vacuole also. So when it is growing, it is what it is doing, it is throwing its nucleus to, nucleus basically to one side. So this is basically, it just appears to like it appears to be like a ring on your finger. So this protruded portion is the nucleus part and this is the vacuole. So this particular stage is known as the signet ring stage. So this is the trophozoite, which is also appearing to be like the signet ring stage. Now the further growth is still continuing. The vacuole is going to disappear. In the next step, the vacuole is going to disappear and the trophozoite, so this is the vacuole here and this was the nucleus. Now here what has happened, the vacuole has disappeared and it has formed a irregular shape, and we call it this irregular shape as the nucleus still remains, and we call the stage as the amoeboid stage. So now you can see it is a form of an amoeba and it has pseudopodia. So with the help of these pseudopodia, again we are mentioning them as trophozoites. These are the different phases of trophozoites. It is basically growing in size. So this trophozoite is feeding on the cytoplasm corpuscle. It is feeding on the cytoplasm of the corpuscle. the cytoplasm of the corpuscle is getting digested, right? And it is getting assimilated by the trophozoite. So here now what happens? All the cytoplasm is, as I just mentioned, that it is digested by the trophozoite. The only thing which is not digested is hemoglobin, right? So hemoglobin is not digested. Rest everything is digested by the trophozoite. So now when hemoglobin is not digested, it gets decomposed into a brown pigment, right? And that brown pigment is known as the hematin. Rest everything is absorbed, digested by the trophozoite. Only the thing which is not digested is the hemoglobin, and we mention it as hematin. Right. So this hematin lies within the cytoplasm of the trophozoite. So this is within, you can say, right, starting from this stage up to this stage, it is taking around 36 hours. Right. So this is, you can say, in about 36 hours, the trophozoite is becoming mature and it is having a rounded shape. So if we just talk about the ultrastructure of trophozoite, so it is basically a two-layered plasma membrane, right? And it has cytoplasm, which contains endoplasmic reticulum. Endoplasmic reticulum has smooth endoplasmic and rough endoplasmic reticulum, whereas these ribosomes, they are really attached to the rough endoplasmic reticulum. So as you can see, the structure of trophozoite, which has plasma membrane. Within the plasma membrane, just like any other cell organelle, it has mitochondria, it has food vacuoles, it has ribosomes. So previously also I've mentioned that it has endoplasmic reticulum, both smooth and rough, and these ribosomes are attached to the rough endoplasmic reticulum. Along with it, it also has those same hematin granules and certain vacuoles. So this is the structure of a trophozoite, a mature trophozoite. Okay. Then we talk about the next phases which occur after the adult trophozoite is made. So the adult trophozoite almost fills the corpuscle, which gets enlarged in size, and now it is ready for another phase, which is the multiple fission. So here another phase, that is the multiple fission. And when the multiple fission takes place, it undergoes, we call it as the erythrocytic schizon. Erythrocytic schizon. So it goes the same way as previously also discussed. The schizont is going to have a nuclei. This nuclei is going to again divide, and it is going to have many nuclei. Each nuclei is going to have a cytoplasm along with it, on which it is going to feed, and then finally it is going to form another type of a parasites. We call them as merozoites. So they are going to be like this. We call them as merozoites. So how they have been formed? When they feed on the cytoplasm of the, each nuclei is feeding on the cytoplasm. So they are around 12 to 24 in number. So the nuclei basically, they vary from 12 to 24, and accordingly they form the merozoites. These nuclei, as you can see here, these nuclei are coming towards the periphery, leaving hematin in the center. So what is this hematin? This hematin was the same that was not digested. So we call it as the hematin. Hematin not digested. So if we talk about how many merozoites are formed, because nuclei were 24, so the same we say that the merozoites are also how many? 12 to 24 in number. If we have to differentiate how basically they are different, how merozoites are different from the sporozoites. So it's a very simpler and a easier manner how we can. Basically these sporozoites are shorter in size, right? And they are also thicker. Whereas The sporozoite we've already discussed. They were sickle shaped. Okay, next we talk about how basically these hematin molecules are responsible for the formation of, you can say, toxic material within the corpuscle. So what happens? A part of the cytoplasm, I'm talking about this particular stage, in intermediate this stage. So a part of the cytoplasm here, part of the cytoplasm, not the entire, but only the part of the cytoplasm of schizont is not used in the formation of merozoites, because as I have already discussed, what is the role of cytoplasm? It gets attached, or you can say it comes along the nuclei, right? And one nuclei with the cytoplasm, it forms the merozoite. So a part doesn't involve here. So this part, the remaining part is known as the residual cytoplasm. So what this residual cytoplasm consists of? It consists of hematin. It consists of hematin. It consists of certain metabolic wastes which have been produced by the parasite. Metabolic wastes which have been produced by the parasites. And finally, what happens? The merozoites, they arrange themselves in the rosette form, just like the petals of rose. So they have to be around 24. So accordingly, they will be arranged 24 nuclei. And in the center is going to be what? In the center is going to be the residual cytoplasm, which contains hematin, metabolic waste, etc. and certain other toxic material also. So this stage is the rosette stage, right? Now, right, starting from the micrometacryptomerozoite up to the rosette stage, it has taken how much time? Right, starting from here to here, it has taken 48 hours to form the rosette stage. And now after this, the corpuscle gets weakened. Corpuscle gets weakened, and like previously we had studied about the liver cell, it is also going to rupture, and these merozoites are going to be in the plasma. So all these 24 merozoites are going to be in the plasma, along with what else is going to be there? The residual cytoplasm. So this residual cytoplasm, what does it contain? It contains hematin, metabolic waste, and certain toxic material, certain toxic also. So these are from the parasites, right? So now once it is in the blood plasma, then our immune system starts working. Once the residual cytoplasm is in the blood plasma, the phagocytes, where are the phagocytes found? They are found in the RES, that is your reticuloendothelial system. So that can be your spleen, that can be liver, kidneys, right? So from these organs, phagocytes come out and they phagocytize the toxic material, okay, as far as possible, right? So this is basically the first line of defense which can be there. Certain merozoites are damaged by our immune system. One, we have discussed about the phagocytes, which are going to be released from the spleen, liver or kidney. Or the merozoites are also damaged by the leukocytes, WBCs, right? Because we know neutrophils, they undergo phagocytism. So they also act as phagocytes. The leftover merozoites, what they are going to do? They are going to creep in the blood plasma like tiny amoebulae, right? So they are going to amoebulae in the blood plasma and then again enter the fresh RBC, right? So this basically, this particular process is repeated again and again, and at least 5 times. This particular cycle has to be completed at least 5 times so as the person gets the fever, to which we call as the erythrocytic fever. Erythrocytic fever is basically what we consider it as the fever in case of malaria, it is different with respect to different species. So as I'm talking about Plasmodium vivax, so it takes around 48 hours, okay, for the infection to occur or for the fever to come. So basically for the erythrocytic schizogony to occur, we require 5 times this particular cycle to undergo. And now what is going to happen? In each time, these residual cytoplasm is going to be released into the blood plasma. It is going to have toxic materials because of which fever comes in the body, right? So this is basically very important that at least this erythrocytic schizogony has to be there at least for 5 times, because for the fever to come we require more and more of toxic material within the body, right? So then the patient is going to suffer the attack of malaria. When? How? When the erythrocytes are going to break. Erythrocytes break karenge and the attack of malaria is going to be there. Right. So basically Plasmodium vivax, it takes around 48 hours. So basically the fever which is going to occur, so fever is going to come every third day. Fever is going to come every third day. So what exactly happens when this fever is coming? There is destruction of RBCs. And when destruction of RBCs is taking place, when destruction of RBC is taking place, what is happening? The RBC is getting ruptured. RBC is getting ruptured. At the same time, there is release of toxic materials, toxins, which have been released by the releasing of toxins, because of which the patient also feels chilly. So basically when the erythrocytes are broken, or we can say they break down, we feel chilly. So this is also in case of anemia. Another very important point is regarding the term known as paroxysm. Now what do you understand by this term paroxysm? This is basically a sudden and a temporary attack. It is a sudden and a temporary attack of what? Fever. Okay? So what exactly is going to happen here? The fever is going to rise to a very high temperature, and that fever will be sufficient enough to kill many toxic material within the body. So basically by this activity, it is going to counteract the chilliness and toxins in the body, right? So this is normally, it is in case of some viral fever also. When we have viral fever, after some time we get high fever, and accordingly it subsides when these bacteria or viruses, they have been damaged by the high temperature. So this erythrocytic schizogony which we have discussed, so it is basically different in case of different species. So if I just cite you one example here, like we have 4 different type of Plasmodium. Plasmodium malariae, then we have Plasmodium ovale, then we have Plasmodium vivax, we've already discussed, right? And it is falciparum. Right. So I'm not going to go much into the detail, only with respect to the erythrocytic schizogony. So here in case of Plasmodium malariae, here we can say the erythrocytic schizogony, it gets completed in 72 hours. In case of malaria, it is 72 hours. So we can say here that the fever recur every 4th day. Every fourth day. every fourth day, right? Whereas in case of ovale, it is again 48 hours, and here the fever every third day. And last we have the falciparum, which takes about 48 hours, but yes, it is irregular here. And we also mention it as sometimes here the fever also occurs daily. So sometimes on the third day. So it is basically, we can mention it as irregular time, right? So basically you can see here the erythrocytic schizophrenia in different species takes different time, right? So here it is totally altogether different, but ovale basically it is 48 hours only, but it is still, we can say the incubation time is slightly shorter of the Plasmodium ovale as compared to the vivax. So this is with the erythrocytic schizophrenia, and we also call this erythrocytic schizophrenia as cycle of Golgi. So it is the name of the discoverer, that is Golgi. So erythrocytic schizophrenia is also known as erythrocytic schizophrenia is also known as cycle of Golgi. So we're done with the erythrocytic schizophrenia, which is also known as the cycle of Golgi, right? So now after the erythrocytic schizophrenia is done, we are going to study about the gamophony. So as the term is saying gamo means gametes, right? So in this particular gamophony, we are going to study how the gametes are being formed, right? So what is gamophony? Previously also I've already mentioned that gamophony is the process which starts in human, right? It starts in human. You can see here it's starting in human and it is ending up in the mosquito, right? And this is the only phase with sexual reproduction. In case of the erythrocytic schizophrenia, once the RBC has been ruptured and the merozoites are in the blood plasma. So up to this stage, we are done with the schizophrenia. Once these merozoites, they are entering into, now this is the basic process, see, the merozoites, they are entering into the RBCs. And then again, they are going to form the trophozoite and accordingly, the fever is going to come and the erythrocytic schizophrenia is going to get completed. You know, the erythrocytic schizophrenia, when erythrocytic schizophrenia is taking place, so what is happening there? There is increase in the number of parasites. So this is the very important thing of the erythrocytic schizophrenia, increase in the number of parasites. Now after some time, what is going to happen in the patient? These number of parasites, they are going to become very much numerous. They are going to become numerous in the host. And you know, when these parasites, they become numerous in the host, in the man, they are going to damage the RBCs. And now you can see the amount of damage that is going to occur in the RBCs. So basically we can also say rupturing of RBCs. So if this mechanism continues of damaging and rupturing of RBC, there's a probability that the host will die, right? So the host is the human being. So he or she is going to die. So now what happened, just to, this is basically a defense mechanism, or we can say this is something which has been planned by nature. So what happens in order to compensate this condition where the host doesn't die, because you know what happens if the host dies, it is directly related that the parasites are going to die. So it is basically correlated. If the host is going to die, the parasites which are in the host, they are also going to die. So as to avoid this situation, what happens? These parasites, rather than becoming into a trophozoite, right? Normally we know that they enter into the RBCs and they become the trophozoite, and then the signature stage, amoeboid, hemozoid, the rosette stage, and so on. So rather than forming the trophozoite stage, coming into the schizont, it forms the rounded structure, and we call those structures as the gametocytes. Right. So initially, when we talk about the trophozoite, they're entering into the RBCs and then they are becoming a rounded structure. But this rounded structure is a schizont. We call it as the schizont, which grows on feeding, right? And the various stages we have already studied. So, which occurs in the erythrocytic schizogony. But this is just to avoid the situation of that the host doesn't die. Once these parasites, the merozoites, they enter into the RBCs. Now they are not going to become a schizont, they become the gametocyte. So how these gametocytes they look like? They look like a rounded structure, right? And these gametocytes are of two types. One is the male gametocyte, another one is the female gametocyte, right? So male gametocytes, they are comparatively, as generally we have studied, the male is smaller, right? So the male is smaller, whereas it is few in number, whereas the female is larger in size, right? So it is larger and it is numerous. So this, you can also have a comparative chart to it. And if we talk about their staining technique, basically we can say that how do they stain themselves. So basically there is cytoplasm here. In case of male, the cytoplasm stains in respect to the cytoplasm. So it stains faintly. The reason behind it is that the males, they do not have much reserve food. Whereas in case of female, the cytoplasm stains very dark stain because of the presence of abundance of reserve food. So large reserve of food. Abundance reserve food is present in case of the female gametocyte. Another very important point here, in case of the female gametocyte and male, is regarding their nucleus position. In case of the male, you can see here it is towards the center, whereas if I just change it a bit, it comes towards one end. That is, we say that the nucleus here is eccentric. Eccentric means that it is not exactly in the center but towards the other end. So here with respect to the nucleus. So this is how you can differentiate between the male and the female gametocytes. Right. So up to here, the cycle is taking place in the humans. So these two are the stages which are going to be sucked up by the female anopheles, and if these stages are not sucked up by the female anopheles, they are going to die within the host because they cannot survive the higher temperature that humans have. So they survive well in the mosquitoes, female mosquitoes, because they have a lower temperature. Basically, that is the requirement of the body. Low temperature is required for their fulfillment. So the next stage comes where the infection to mosquito occurs. So the next stage is infection to mosquito. So as previously also I told you that infection of mosquito, it is going to be with the help of these gametocytes. And if the mosquito doesn't suck up the blood of the infected host, of the infected human being, these gametocytes are going to go waste, right? And the life cycle will not be completed, right? So now if the mosquitoes have sucked the blood, so when they have sucked the blood of the human, there are going to be, along with the gametocytes, there are going to be certain trophozoite stages also, right? So it is not only that only the gametocytes are sucked, because they don't know themselves what they are sucking. So gametocytes are sucked as well as the trophozoites are sucked. So both are sucked, but if we talk about their survival rate, the trophozoites, they cannot survive. in the host, in the mosquito, female mosquito. So yes, they are sucked up with the blood, but they cannot survive in the gut region of female anopheles. So they go off. Whereas the gametocytes, they pass through their gut region. It passes from their mouth to the esophagus, and finally they come up to the stomach. So these, as you can see, that they have a covering around themselves. So basically, from their mouth up to their esophagus region, they are resistant, right? So the wall doesn't get digested. But in the stomach region of the mosquito, this covering gets dissolved by the digestive juices which are present in the gut region. So these gametocytes now, they are left only with the gamete. Right. So this is basically, they are going to be free of the corpuscle. So this was the lining of the corpuscle, RBC covering, right? And now in the stomach, it is going to be free of corpuscle in the stomach region. So as previously also I have mentioned regarding their low temperature, and it is because of the low temperature of the host, of the mosquito, that these gametocytes can survive here, right? Okay, next I talk about how the development of gametocytes, they change into gametes. So how gametocytes, so this is the same interesting mechanism that we had studied previously also during the schizophrenia part, how the gametocytes are going to get converted into gametes. So the two processes we are going to study here, one is the gametogenesis, and another one is the fertilization. Right, so as the term says, gametogenesis. So gametogenesis, it is going to be the formation of either male or female gametes. And again, we can say here that the gametes formed here are heterogametes. The reason being because they are dissimilar. I've already differentiated the reason behind that. So they are heterogametes because they differ from one another. Now, how exactly formation of male gametes take place? Formation of male gamete. If I talk about a microgametocyte, right, now which is already free of the corpuscle, right, so it is free of the corpuscle and it has a nucleus in the center with the cytoplasm, right. So now this microgametocyte, we call it as the microgametocyte. This microgametocyte, it is going to produce male gametes, and these male gametes corresponds to the spermatozoas. Now, how these spermatozoas are formed, this is by the same procedure that we had studied during the process of schizophrenia, where the nucleus, you can see this nucleus, this is the nucleus here. So now this nucleus is going to divide. Now when this nucleus is going to divide, it is going to divide into around 4 to 8 daughter nuclei. And now these nuclei, each nuclei, because this is the nuclei, this nuclei is going to be with a bit of cytoplasm. So this is the cytoplasm and this is the nuclei, right? So we said that there are around 8 daughter nuclei. So accordingly, 8 spermatozoas are going to be formed. So you can see this nuclei is getting nourishment from the cytoplasm and it forms the next stage, which we call as the sperm. Right. So basically, we can also call it as a sperm. We can also call it as a spermatozoa. We can also call it as the now we are not going to call it as a male gamete. Okay. So it is corresponding to sperm because its appearance is going to change and it is going to become with the lashing movement. Right. So it's going to be like this and it is going to have that flagella-like motion where it is going to be in search of the ova. Right. And the male gametes, when we talk about the cytoplasm, which is there in the microgametocyte, all the cytoplasm is not going to be utilized by the nuclei. As we've mentioned that nuclei uses some cytoplasm, but there is some amount of cytoplasm which is left. So we call that leftover cytoplasm as the residual cytoplasm. So this residual cytoplasm, or we can also call it as the unused cytoplasm, which have hematin within it. Okay? So hematin is nothing but that the hemoglobin portion which was not digested. Okay? So this is regarding the formation of male gamete, formation of a spermatozoa. Right. Next we talk about, so it is formation of male gamete. Next we have formation of female gamete. Formation of female gamete. The process remains same here again. I talk about the macrogametocyte. Okay, so this is the macro. The nucleus is a bit eccentric, and we call it as the macrogametocyte. So the same process as we had discussed in the male gamete. This nuclei is going to divide, right? And when it divides into two portions, right? Here in the previous one we discussed, it divides into 4 to 8 daughter nuclei, but here only into two parts. So one is the broader one and one is a little lesser to it. Okay? So again it has that cytoplasm along with it. So the larger one, the larger nuclei which you can see here, larger nuclei with the cytoplasm forms the ova, whereas the smaller one with the cytoplasm forms the polar body. So how it appears to be like? It appears to be like this. This is the ova, right? And here it is the polar body. So this is the polar body and this is the ova. This is one case where how female gametes are formed. And if I talk about the male gametocyte, you can see the sperm here. And in the center, there is going to be this residual cytoplasm which contains hematin. So you can see here the process known as exflagellation occurs. So it is like this basically. With the cytoplasm, they are attached with the unused cytoplasm. So here there are around 4 to 8 sperms. Right, depending, sometimes it is 4 to 8. So basically it is a variant thing. So this is how your female gametes are formed and male gametes are formed. So we are done with the one process under how the development of gametocytes takes place, that is the gametogenesis. Next we talk about the fertilization. So fertilization is the process where the female gamete and the male gamete are going to fuse together. So before this process starts of fusion, the female gametocyte, it develops a cone of reception, right? So this cone of reception is a place where it is going to receive the sperm, right? So we call this projection. It appears to be like somewhat like this. This is an ova. So it has this cone of reception. So this is basically cone of reception. Now in one ova at a time, one sperm is going to penetrate through this cone. And now as the normal process undergoes, the nuclei and the cytoplasm of male and female gamete are going to fuse and they are going to form a zygote. So this nuclei and cytoplasm of the two gametes, when they fuse together, it forms a single cell which is 2x. We call it as the zygote. We also call this process as the syngamy. So this is one process which has occurred in the mosquito. Another process which occurs in mosquito is the encystment. After the zygote has been formed, the next process which this zygote is going to undergo, that is the encystment. So what do you understand by the term encystment? Encystment means that there is going to be a covering of cyst wall around the zygote. Cyst wall around the zygote. Now if you can see here, the zygote, it doesn't have any flagella or flagella-like appearance somewhere, or neither it is sickle shape as we had discussed in sporozoites or merozoites. So it is something rounded in shape. So basically the zygote is motionless. right? It doesn't have any locomotory organelle, we can say. Now, the next step after it, it soon becomes elongated. It soon becomes elongated, and then when it becomes elongated, it again, how does it elongate? The same process, the nucleus, it again divides, and then it forms the next stage known as the ookinete. So, this ookinete, the zygote has elongated itself and it appears like a worm-like structure. We call it as the ookinete. This ookinete, as you can see, it is pointed at both the ends. So this ookinete has the potential to penetrate the wall of the stomach of mosquito. So this has the ability of piercing the wall of stomach. And whose stomach? It is mosquito stomach. Right. The other name to ookinete, this can also be as a part of important MCQ. Ookinete is also known as the vermicule. Right. So now this ookinete is going to pierce the wall of the stomach, and where it is going to rest? It is going to rest on the outermost layer of the stomach, where it is going to assume, for example, see this diagram here. This is the ookinete, right? And now it is penetrating the wall of the stomach, and it has formed this cyst wall, a rounded body, and a cyst wall is there around it, and the ookinete has been transformed into another structure that is known as the oocyst, right? So this oocyst is covering the cyst wall. So now you can see how the ookinete has pierced the stomach wall and it has become a rounded structure covered by the cyst wall. So when it it penetrates the outermost layer, it becomes the oocyst, and this oocyst is going to be covered by the cyst wall. And how this basically cyst wall is formed here? The cyst wall is derived partly from the zygote and partly from the insect tissue. So this is how the cyst wall is formed. So it is partly from the zygote and partly from the tissues. Now at this particular stage, we call this parasite as the oocyst, or the other name to oocyst is sporon. Right? So these are the other names. It can also be asked in case of your MCQs that way. Now, if we talk about how many oocysts are formed in one, or how many oocysts are you going to visualize in the stomach of one mosquito? So they are around 50 oocysts in the stomach wall of the mosquito. Up to this process, where the oocyst was formed with the cyst wall penetrating the walls of the stomach. So here the oocyst is formed. Up to this stage, the process is known as the gamogony, right? So now you can see the formation of gametes have already been done, and fertilization is also been done. So these are the processes which come under gamogony. Last, we talk about the sporogony. So as the term is saying, last part of the life cycle in Plasmodium is sporogony. So what exactly sporogony is sporogony, as the term is saying, something related with sporozoites. So here is the last stage where we started with, we are going to end up with the same thing. So here something related with sporozoites are going to be formed. So let's see how we get back to the same situation. So the oocyst that we have discussed, this is going to grow in size. It is going to grow in size. Initially it was smaller. Now it is taking nourishment from the mosquito, right? And that nourishment can be drawn by means of the permeable cyst wall. So basically this cyst wall is permeable in its nature. Had it was not permeable, then drawing of nourishment would not be possible. Second step, the cyst wall is also going to increase as the size of the oocyst is increasing, right? So basically it is flexible enough to and it is you can say it can accommodate the parasites which are growing inside. Now there is cytoplasm here in the oocyst, and these cytoplasms, they develop large number of vacuoles, and there is a nucleus also. So the next step, what happens? The nucleus is going to divide, as we have studied previously also. The nucleus divides repeatedly, and when it's going to divide, it is going to lead into, or it is going to result into many daughter nuclei. The same process, those many daughter nuclei are going to be surrounded by the cytoplasm, and each daughter nuclei is going to get converted into another parasite which we call as the sporozoid. So it is the same that we had started with. It is the sporozoid which is sickle shaped and tapering at both the ends. In this case also, there is going to be certain amount of cytoplasm which is going to be unused, right? So some cytoplasm of this oocyst is again left unused for the, so each and every if we say cytoplasm is not utilized for the production of the sporozoid. So if I talk about how many sporozoids are formed in a oocyst, so how many sporozoids are formed in a oocyst? So in one oocyst, so if you remember in the previous lecture, I just mentioned about how many oocysts are there in one mosquito. Uske wall pe how many oocysts are there? So there were around 50 oocysts in the stomach wall of the mosquito, and how many sporozoids are going to be formed from there? They are around 10,000. So you can multiply 10,000 into 50, and you can imagine the amount of sporozoids that are going to be in the oocyst. Right. Afterwards, this is the oocyst which has grown up in size. It has a cyst wall around it, and now it has those sporozoids also. And these sporozoids are going to be arranged around the vacuole. So when you see these ultrastructure of these sporozoids, you are exactly going to see this how the sporozoids are arranged within the oocyst. So these sporozoids, they are arranged around the vacuoles. So like that. The next stage after this, they are going to break up from the oocyst. So these sporozoids are going to break out from the oocyst. Now when these sporozoids are breaking down from the oocyst, where they are going to go? They are going to go into the hemocoel. Hemocoel is what? It is basically the body cavity of insects, right? And once it is in the hemocoel, so it is the body cavity. And one thing more, as previously mentioned, that it is on the outermost wall. So outermost wall of the stomach, and the next part after stomach comes the hemocoel. So then these sporozoids are wandering in the hemocoel. From the body cavity, these sporozoids, because you can see their nature, that is motile, they have this lashing movement. So they are going to enter any organ, right? So any organ they can enter, but their preference is the salivary glands. So preference is the salivary glands, and from the salivary glands, when they are going to suck the blood of human, because we know mosquitoes, they have piercing and biting type of mouthparts, so they are going to pierce the skin of the human, and when they are piercing it, they have the habit of injecting saliva. And what is the role of injecting saliva? In the first lecture I told you that it helps to prevent clotting of blood, right? And when if they would not have thrown this saliva, the blood would have immediately clotted out. Right. So now when they are ejecting out the saliva, at the same time when they are drawing the blood from the human being, this saliva which contains sporozoids are going to enter into the human being. So these sporozoids they've entered into the human being through the saliva. So if I just talk about a statistical data, how much amount of sporozoites are there in one single infected mosquito. So a single infected female which is infected has around, in its salivary glands, around 2 lakh sporozoites. So a single infected female has around how many sporozoites? 2 lakh sporozoites. So the female Anopheles doesn't throw all those 2 lakh sporozoites in one go. So in one bite, she's able to transfer around 1000 sporozoites into the human being. So now we can imagine the amount of damage that they are going to do to the liver cells. So again, the life cycle, we come back to the same where we started. So these sporozoites are going to be in the blood of human. Okay, it's going to be for half an hour there, and then finally it's going to enter into the liver cell. So now we can see here one sporozoite entering one liver cell, 1000 sporozoites entering 1000 liver cells, and then 1000 liver cells are going to be infected with those parasites. So sporogony is also known as the cycle of Ross. As we had studied, cycle of erythrocytic schizogony was also known as the cycle of Golgi. So same way we have the other name to sporogony, that is the cycle of Ross. Towards the end, I would just conclude by that the entire development of parasite inside the mosquito, it is inside the mosquito. So I think you can understand it starts once the male gametocytes have freed themselves from the corpuscle. So from there up to the stage where the sporozoites are released outside into the hemocoel, it is taking around 10 to 3 weeks. So the time it is taking, the entire development of parasites in the mosquito is 10 to 3 weeks. So again, it is dependent on the temperature. So next we talk about the pathogenicity. Pathogenicity in Plasmodium vivax. So the first and the very most important symptom here is regarding their fever. So if we talk about the symptoms of malaria, when do they come up? So basically it comes after the symptoms of malaria. In case of Plasmodium vivax, it appears after around 14 days of initial infection, right? And this is basically initial infection, and this is variant in case of each species. Like we have 4 species here: Plasmodium vivax, oval, malaria, and falciparum. So we've already discussed the incubation time to them. So it is after the 12 to 14 days that the patient is going to get the symptoms, only when the micrometacryptomerozoites, they come and enter into the RBC. So it is only then when the erythrocytic schizogony, the symptoms will start coming in the body of human. Another very important, it comes in respect with the fever only. How basically fever comes. So the fever comes basically when there is accumulation of merozoites. So accumulation of merozoites. And where are these accumulation of merozoites? They are in the blood. So along with these merozoites, it also releases certain toxic material. So those toxins are actually responsible for having that high fever in the body. And these merozoites are deposited in the spleen, liver, and even under the skin. And we have these phagocytes there, so accordingly they scavenge them. But when the number increases to a very large amount, then accordingly the patient can also die. So this has to be taken care of. So next we talk about the paroxysm. What is this paroxysm? So this is basically the sudden and the temporary attack of fever. So, which is basically divided into three parts. One is chill stage, another one is high fever stage, where the temperature goes above 104, and the last one is the sweating stage. Right. So, this is regarding the paroxysm. Now, what happens to these accumulated toxins which are there in the body? So, this gives the patient this chillness, shiver, and high temperature, and finally leading into sweating. So this is basically regarding the paroxysm. Now this fever, it lasts for around 6 to 10 hours. Then it comes again on the third day, or we can say after 48 hours, coinciding with the new generation of merozoites. So merozoites accumulation has to be there for the new fever to come up after on the third day. So the type of malaria which is caused in Plasmodium vivax, we call it as the benign tertian malaria. So we call it as the benign tertian malaria. And after repeated and simultaneous schizogony, the schizogony is the erythrocytic schizogony, which large number of erythrocytes are destroyed at an interval of 48 hours, and then finally they are releasing large amount of toxin in the blood, which causes this paroxysm in the patient. So as we know that when these merozoites are rupturing from the RBCs, they are destroying the RBCs. So when the erythrocytes are getting damaged, it is leading into another problem in the body of the patient, that is anemia. And anemia occurs why? Because of the destruction of large number of erythrocytes. So this leads into anemia. And once these RBCs are there with the merozoites, the RBCs are very fragile and they can be easily ruptured and damaged. So this is one thing. A very important point, why exactly these erythrocytes are getting damaged. So there is another component which is released by the enlarged spleen. So the third symptom which is shown is the splenomegaly. So what happens in splenomegaly, as the term is saying, it is enlargement of the spleen. So when the spleen it enlarges in its size, it releases a lytic substance. And what is that lytic substance known as? It is known as the lysolecithin. So it's just like an enzyme where what it is going to do, it is going to damage the erythrocyte. So as it is going to damage the erythrocyte, the RBCs will be destroyed. So it is because of the lecithin which the enlarged spleen is producing. Enlarged spleen is producing this lysolecithin which is damaging the RBCs. The parasites which are infecting in the spleen are also believed to produce an antibody. So the antibody which these parasites produce is known as the hemolysin. So as the term says, hemo means it is related with the blood and lysin means breakdown. So hemolysin, it hemolyzes the normal erythrocyte. It hemolyzes the normal RBC. So we can see by means of enlarged spleen also the erythrocytes are getting damaged by means of two products which have been formed. One is the lysolecithin and another one is the hemolysin. If you talk about severe anemia, when severe anemia takes place, so severe anemia is also correlated which leads into renal failure. So kidney failure is another symptom here when the patient is suffering from severe anemia. Certain other complications also occur in the body. One can be the hypoglycemia. So what is this hypoglycemia? Hypoglycemia is basically when there is increased use of glucose and at the same time there is impaired glucose production. So this is what hypoglycemia is. Another one, we're talking about the other complications when the anemia is severe. So one is your hypoglycemia, another one is your pulmonary edema. So what is this pulmonary edema? Pulmonary edema is when there is some accumulation of fluid in the lungs. And the third complication is gastroenteritis. There are certain patients who are basically protected from Plasmodium vivax. So who are those? There are certain individuals whose RBCs, they lack the antigen. What is that antigen? There are certain patients who lack the antigen known as the Duffy factor. So the patient who lack this antigen known as Duffy factor, they are protected from Plasmodium vivax. So basically, this Plasmodium vivax is not going to complete its cycle in them. Okay. If we talk about what all the parasitized RBCs they can do in our body, right? So the parasitized RBCs are the ones when they are with the merozoites, right? So these parasitized, they accumulate in the sinuses, right? So sinuses are what? Liver, spleen, bone marrow. So we are going to see here how exactly these parasite RBCs are infecting or damaging these three organs and kidneys, adrenal glands. So we'll be talking about these organs. So first I talk about the spleen. Spleen basically, yes, we know that it is one of the symptoms that the patient suffers from splenomegaly. But these parasitized RBCs, what they undergo here the spleen becomes enlarged and congested. So is congested. So splenomegaly, here we can discuss it into two categories. You can see here splenomegaly, which takes place by these parasitized RBCs. So this splenomegaly in two form. One is the acute one and another one is the chronic one. So in the acute one, the spleen is enlarged and congested and it is also soft and hemorrhagic. Whereas in the chronic stage, the spleen becomes hard. And as the quantity of hematin, we can say, it keeps increasing, the color of, so how the color of spleen darkens, it is because of the presence of hematin. It is because of the presence of hematin, the color of spleen darkens. Okay, then this was regarding the spleen. Next we talk about the liver. In liver, the liver becomes hypertrophic. So, the cells become hyper. In case of liver, the cells become hypertrophic. In case of acute malaria. And again, if we talk about the size, the size of the liver cell, it is really greater than the normal. So this is in case of acute malaria. Then we talk about the bone marrow. What happens to the bone marrow? It also undergoes similar changes, just like we had discussed in the spleen, right? But addition to it, it's just like we had studied it into two categories, acute and the chronic phase. In acute, it becomes soft and hemorrhagic. And again, in the acute chronic phase, it becomes hard. Along with it, bone marrow. In bone marrow, the erythropoiesis, that is the formation of RBCs increase. Erythropoiesis. So this process is increased here. Erythropoiesis, it increases. So here erythropoiesis means that the formation of RBCs are increased. So at the same time, we know that during malaria, RBCs are getting destroyed. So bone marrow, it is increasing the number of RBCs. So this process is enhanced in case when the bone marrows become infected. And then we talk about what happens to the kidneys. In case of kidneys, they also become congested. The glomerular capillaries, they become thrombotic. So what do you understand by the term thrombotic? Thrombotic means that there comes a clot, thrombotic. And along with this clot, there are accumulation of parasitized RBCs. So parasitized RBCs are there. Along with it, within this thrombotic uh, material, there is parasitized RBCs. There is also free hematin and certain wandering hematin and wandering macrophages. Wandering macrophages. Right. So here in kidney, it becomes congested. The glomerular capillaries, they become thrombotic, and thrombotic means formation of a clot. And when this clot accumulation is there, so what all is there within that clot? It contains the parasitized RBCs, it contains free hematin and certain wandering macrophages so as to phagocytize the unwanted materials. And last, we talk about the adrenal gland, which also becomes damaged by hemorrhagic activity. So these are the organs which are basically damaged by means of parasitized RBC. So by this, we have completed with the life history and pathogenicity of Plasmodium vivax. So it is only with Plasmodium vivax we have different type of pathogenicity with different type of species. So I think this video will be beneficial to you. Thank you for watching.